So I'm going to talk about the transformation of a small country town called Clunes. It's about 10-15 minutes north of Ballarat, and it's quite an amazing town. The story is really about this group here who are called Creative Clunes and what they've done to help transform that place. My role has really just been to work with them on a project called Advancing Country Towns for a period of 2 years, and that was supporting them in some of the development work that they were doing. So Clunes, a little bit about the place, population of around 1,000. It's Gold Rush town, so the Victorian Gold Rush in the 1850s was triggered out of Clunes. It's a typical country village. You probably might have seen that streetscape in Mad Max and also in Ned Kelly with Heath Ledger, so it's familiar to some people. Like a lot of small country towns, the cultural diversity extends to a 50-50 mix of Catholics and Protestants. Interestingly, in the early 2000s, a few tree changes started moving into the place and it began to change. So they had a summit in 2007 because they recognised the place was starting to really struggle. Half the main street was empty in terms of the shops. And Tess Brady, one of the founders of Creative Clunes, and Tim Hayes, this event was the genesis of Creative Clunes starting. Tess had the idea of turning Clunes into a book village. Tim had the idea of having a book market. They met somewhere in the middle and decided to use the bookstores to run a market for a weekend, called it Back to Book Town. A lot of the locals said it was impossible and it wouldn't happen. The first event they had, they hoped to get 3,000 people there. They missed their target, they got 6,000. They ran out of food, they ran out of coffee, they tripped out the town's electricity supply. It was an amazing transformation. But interestingly, more than 300 people, over 30% of the population, volunteered before, during and after that event to make it happen. Out of that, they then started to get a little bit ambitious, and so the first event was May 2008. Since then, the event now gets up to 20,000 people on the first weekend in May, in a town of 1,000 people. The traders who come to set up shop there for the weekend, the stalls sell out in less than a week when they go online or are made available, and they're now paying up to $1,600 to Creative Clunes to use those stalls for that weekend. The event also activates empty buildings in the town, so what was once a liability has now become the community's asset because they're using those empty shops. They also decided to apply for funding through the Crunch project with social traders to try and become a social enterprise. Their idea was to set up a community-owned bookstore. They didn't get funded and they were really disappointed, and they were told that by the mentor that was assigned to them that Clunes as a town of 1,000 people couldn't sustain a bookstore. Their response was, well, get stuffed, we'll do it anyway. They set up 2 and they were run entirely by volunteers. The volunteers then took the bookstores over and started running them as businesses so Creative Clunes could focus on their core activities. There's now 8 bookstores in Clunes in a town of 1,000 people. So I think they kind of got their message across. It's also been declared Australia's first international book town by the International Organisation of Book Towns. And they've also, if you go down the main street of Clunes now, there's 3 cafes, there's a bakery, they've got an ATM machine, their train service has been returned, so they've had $1 million pumped into the train station, so they're doing amazing work. They've then gone out and seeded their own pottery prize. It's now the 2nd richest pottery prize in Australia. It's going great guns. They run a program called Sunday Selection where they get artists and authors to come each month and talk in town. So they're running micro events based off that large event. They're spinning out their own children's book town as a standalone event, which is the next thing they're going to do. They've established ties with the Australia-Korea Foundation with Paju Book City, and they've also applied for a €350,000 project with 3 cities from Europe that have book towns, or countries that have book towns. In the last 5 years, they've had 5 current or former Prime Ministers visit a town of 1,000 people. I don't know another town in Australia that would have had that. I love the photo of Bob Hawke. You surround Hawkey with a couple of books and suddenly he's wearing a cravat and drinking red wine. But there's guys here, international guys here from overseas, presidents of the International Organisation of Book Towns coming to meet with Clunes and to talking to them about how they do it. This project here, they've been funded by the federal government, $3.5 million for a redevelopment of their old museum into a community space. And that's all come about on the back of what they've done with Booktown, which was a central plank in that application. My project that I've worked on with them, we're working with the bookstores to help make them sustainable by setting up an e-commerce hub where they can sell their books online under a Clunes brand. So Clunes is taking on Amazon. How cool is that? They are just incredibly ambitious people, and that's the end of the presentation. And I just need to say a really big thank you to Neil Newitt. Neil's one of those tree changers that came in and made a difference. He's an ex-photographer at The Age, and he kindly donated the use of most of the photos for that presentation, so thanks to Neil.